So I start from a short explanation what this Polish operation of NKVD was constituted of, and that's why please show the next slide. After this introduction, I'm going to present three. In this presentation, actually, I have five interviews with the victims, but in this short version, I present three, which I think are the most interesting and the shortest also from this collection, which constitutes of 45 interviews. So Polish operation, as you see, started in August 1937, and it was the part of the Soviet Great Terror. And understanding and interpretation of the Great Terror that took place in the Soviet Union in the years 1937, 1938, and especially its Polish aspects, have undergone a revolution in the last 20 years. Basing on the documents that were unclassified in Russia, Ukraine, and other former Soviet countries in the beginning in the 90s, researchers found out that events of the years 37-38 were not accidental and carried out at random by capricious and diabolic dictator Joseph Stalin, but rather it was carefully planned extermination executed by NKVD and based on the 8 major orders issued by the leadership of NKVD on behalf of Political Bureau of Communist Party. And it resulted in arrest and murder of approximately 1.5 million people. More than 50 years ago, in the mid-90s, Russian historians have found that Poles living in the USSR were the second largest group after the anti-Soviet peasants, so-called kulaks, among these social groups and nationalities who were considered enemies of the people and were exterminated. It means that this anti-Polish action was the second biggest part of Great Terror. According to data provided then by historians from Memorial Society, at least over 111,000 of Poles were shot in the Polish operation. But of course it was a preliminary estimation, and according to my research, this level of casualties we can estimate now on the level of 200 people. Although the Polish historians consider this number as an estimation, so far no one has conducted studies officially clarifying the number of Polish victims. And as I said, it is still the number which is not obvious. While Poles living in the USSR were being killed on industrial scale, their compatriots in Poland generally had no knowledge of this. It was just in the brink of the Second World War, and Polish politicians and diplomats had other occupations. Maybe this explains to some extent why they were unaware of what had happened just after the border. Of course, several efforts, because some informations about Poles which were missed were sent to the embassies and consulates, and several efforts were made to try to find missing persons, but without any result. After World War II, in fact, only after 1956 did some echoes of these events reach wider public opinion. Yet even these were twisted in paradoxical form. The discussion concerned not on the fate of all Poles, but only on the fate of Polish communists, which were also executed during this time. But it was a small group, about 5,000 communists, and most of them, although they were murdered as the Poles, they actually were Jews. And after 1989, only after this information provided by Memorial, some publications appeared in Polish press, but furthermore, there is no serious attempt to check and clarify all events from the, let's say, state-owned universities or other agencies which I think are destined to do such a thing. That's why I decided to start some researches, and I started it 5 years ago. After 2 years of research, I published first book, which is a collection of documents mentioned by Marek, and this year I published a collection of interviews, also with compendium of literature, which were published before with some aspects of Polish operation reports. So please show the next slide. Those are the locations where the interviews were carried out. About 15 of the interviews I made myself, but most of them were made by Marek Koprowski, who is my journalist from Najwyższy Czas, and who is also a journalist, who was a journalist for Catholic Press, Niedziela Weekly. And for 20 years, he was going throughout the former USSR. We are talking about Kapuściński. I think that the work made by Marek Koprowski is far more interesting, and from the from the point of view of scholarship, it's much more distinguished. This year, Marek Koprowski published also 3 tomes of his interviews with the victims of Wołyń massacre. Yes, Wolynia massacre. So I think that the material which was composed by this man from Częstochowa is very valuable. He was writing for 20 years for my magazine about Soviet Union, so I have thought that it is a very good idea to ask him, is he able to do something about this, and he started these interviews 5 years ago. It was going very slowly, so last year I sent him to Ukraine, especially for those interviews, and he made about 15 interviews in Dołbysz in the Ukraine. Dołbysz was the center of Polish region in Ukraine, so-called Marchlewszczyzna, and during the Soviet times, before Polish operation, the name was changed to Marchlewsk, and after Poles were executed, they decided to change it another time, and now it's still Dobysz as it was before the war, First World War. So please show another slide. And all those interviews, contrary to reports by Kapuściński, are very well documented. There are pictures, of course, and transcripts from records, so there is no doubt that they are true. And I'm going to read 3 accounts. Could you show the next slide? And let's start from account of Leontyna Gawłocka on the picture. Leontyna Gawłocka is the wife of Mr. Gawłocki. Here is my agent. He's not very fit, maybe, but anyway. And both Mr. and Mrs. Gawłocka parents were fathers were shot during the Polish operation, and somehow after they reach their 20s, they started family. So now I read the account of Mrs. Pawłocka. My family was deported in 1936 to Zaporozhian region in Ukraine, where entire regions have been depopulated after the Great Famine. Communists did not, however, left there us alone, because before Soviets started the genocide of Polish people, they were carried out several flows of deportation. And first deportation started in 1930, the second was in 1931, and the biggest was in 1936, just before the Polish operation, and Mrs. Gawłocka family was deported there then. In 1937, my father Władysław was arrested and shot. Before that, my mother Janina had asked my father to leave us and run away. Soviet security organs sniffed around among the displaced and dispossessed Polish people. One after another, they were arrested and died after interrogations. My father, however, did not want to escape. He argued that there is nothing to fear because he is still a simple, ordinary man who did nothing wrong. My mother also explained that he could not leave her alone with 2 daughters and sick father because she was not able to keep the house alone. After my father was arrested, my mother went to the factory where my father worked. She asked the manager why my father was arrested, but he answered that he could not help him. He said, "Bublewska, your husband should be released soon. He was a very good employee. There were never any complaints for him. He had a very good reputation." Only years later, we learned that my father was arrested on the basis of denunciation by one neighbor who wanted from the village council to give him house built by my father. He wanted to dismantle our house for the building material. In 1942, when Ukraine was occupied by the Germans, they let us go back to Zasławszczyzna. Our house, built by my father in Bilotyń, just before the deportation, was demolished for building material. We had no place to live. Nobody wanted to take us under his roof. People were afraid that if Soviets would return soon, and anyone who give help to the enemies of the people will be severely punished. Mom went to the German authorities, and they allowed us to live in the house of our late grandfather. This building was destroyed and abandoned, had no windows and doors, but somehow we reconstructed this house. Grandpa passed away just before our departure in 1942 from the place of exile. He did not want to be buried there. He asked my mother to put together his bones, even into the bag, and drove them to the place of his youth. Mother was not able to do this. So please show another show. And here we have Leontyna Gawłocka, Józefa Lipska, sorry, Józefa Lipska. Where is Józefa Lipska? Here is Józefa Lipska. I was born in 1920. She's still living. She's now 93. So on the first picture, there were presented faces of children from NKVD orphanages, because when they started to shoot the people during the Great Terror, they had no time to think about the consequences. And soon they realized that there are the communists, and soon they realized that there are hundreds of thousands of children which were without parents. So they decided to prepare special chain of orphanages led by NKVD. Actually, it was some kind of concentration camps for children, and part of these people were placed there. And of course, every children was photographed before accession to such a facility, and this first picture with pictures of small children is from the archive of one of these orphanages, and this is how Józefa Lipska and her friends look like 75 and more late. Yes. And now they are not children, of course. She's 93, but she's living. I was born in 1920, and I'm the oldest believer in the parish of Nietyszyn. I was born in Paszuki, large Polish village, 20 kilometers north of Slavuta. Life has spared me nothing. Today I live with my daughter-in-law. My only son unfortunately died. Prayer and conversation with the Polish compatriots encountered by chance are my main joy and happiness. I can still read in Polish both newspapers and books. Read in Polish both newspapers and books. I learned to read in Polish myself. In the Ukrainian school which I attended were also German books in Latin alphabet, so I began to understand Polish words from prayer books we had. This skill has been very useful to me when still as a relatively young person I became head of the Catholic community in Paszuki. As a child, I was attending with my parents the church in Berezdów, where was the center of the parish. I remember the priest of the Lithuanian name served there. He used to ride on the horse. When the Soviets closed the church in Berezdów, he himself managed to escape on the horse. However, he did not give up his parish, and he was serving there secretly. He done it also in my family home, where we worshipped. Because the help of the Polish community, Bolshevik security authorities could not track him down. He had some accommodation from the local people where to hide. Closure of the church in Berezdów in 1937 was a great shock for us, also because it coincided with the arrest of the priest. My father was arrested a few days after the priest was taken. He was accused of belonging to the POW, which is Polish military organization in the order which decided that Polish people should be executed One of the justification was that Polish people are the spies of the special organization set by General Pilsudski during the First World War, which then was not existent in Soviet Union, but anyway, it was some kind of justification. He was accused of belonging to the POW and murdered in Winnica. Before that, he was tortured. One day, Czarny Woron, Czarny Woron is a special car, which was black, which took arrestants to the place of execution, came to Paszuk, and the GPU started to arrest Polish men. In total, with my dad, they took 13 of them. None of them returned. All of them were shot. My father, like others, did not belong to POW. GPU arrested all the Polish people during the Polish Bolshevik War in the Polish army. They believed that the new Polish, those Poles, believed that the new Polish border will be on the river Słuch, not on the river Choryń. As a young boys, they went to the Polish army to conquer Kiev. When they returned after the war, the village was on the Soviet Union side. Poland left them. They were, however, not willing to abandon their family. They paid the ultimate price for this. And the next slide. And this is the last account which I'm going to present, and this is more optimistic, as you will have occasion to see. This is Józef Jabloński, and this interview was done last year on this special trip of Mr. Koprowski to Dołbysz. As a very young boy, I was herding cattle in my home in the village Tartak near Kamienny Brod. Today, this village is almost non-existing. It is inhabited by a few families. When I was 7 years old, in 1932, around the village, a group of party activists and peasants began, and poor peasants, so-called biedniaki, which were opposed to kułaki in the Soviet times, and biedniaki was allowed to rob kułaki. So they began to walk to take the whole grain reserves we had. Father was able to hide in the woods 2 sacks of wheat. That wheat my mother secretly cooked at night for months. At night, and gave us each a handful of life. That is how we survived great famine. However, we were hungry for years and walked barefoot even during the winter. Komsomol groups that were dispatched into the countryside for requisitions were visiting our home and were surprised that we still did not die of hunger. They took a variety of things, including shoes and clothing. After a few such visits, we were also completely dispossessed. Due to the fact that my father decided that he would not join the collective farm, so-called kolkhoz, and that we preferred to die of hunger than to do this, the authorities kicked us out of our house and told us to stay in my grandmother's house. It was a small building compared to our place. Somehow we managed to survive until 1937, when the GPU began to arrest and shoot Poles. My father was called suddenly to the Rural Council, where its chairman, in the greatest secrecy, announced that tomorrow or even tonight the GPU will come after him to arrest him. He was informed that his name is listed on the list of enemies of the people. Head of Rural Council advised him that he should leave the village and move to some other place until his case would not be silenced. My father came home and told my mother about everything, and as he stood without dressing up, walked through the woods, in the direction of the railway station. We saw him only a few years after the start of German-Soviet war, when the Nazis occupied Ukraine. It turned out that he managed to leave to Kiev region, and there somehow he found a job. He did not give any sign of life anyway, because he was afraid that if they find him, they would kill him instantly. The next day after my father escaped, Soviets came after him, and they were very angry that he was not there. I am not sure whether they guessed that he had been warned or not, but a few days later, rural council head was also taken away. After this had happened, we decided to leave our village. We hid ourselves in different places, and then the war had started.
World War II?
Yes. No. German-Soviet war. Because...
Okay, so they were in hiding for 4 years?
Yes. So could you show the next slide? In this collection of interviews, I have also some collections which I'm calling indirect. Those are interviews with certain, yes, mainly priests. They have, they are sometimes in their parishes for years, for 10 years or 15 years, and they have they had occasion to meet very interesting people, and they know the stories of their lives, and even some of the interesting stories are published in local newspapers by them. So it is very interesting also to record such accounts which shed light how all the events took place. Overall, there are 45 interviews. That's what I was able to do myself with the help of Mr. Koprowski. I think that there are still about 10 to 15,000 of witnesses alive. So if someone is interested, there is a big work to do. And they are dying very quickly, unfortunately. As you see, they are in their 80s, in their 90s. Most of them are women, because as everywhere, but especially in Soviet, the life expectancy for a woman is much bigger. And the story of their lives are very similar to the story of so-called children of the Holocaust, but children of the Holocaust after some years were honored, prized, and have some kind of rewards from public knowledge about their fate. So these people were not treated in that mode, so they are still are forced to cope with their fate alone. So that's all. Thank you.